All right, welcome back to Fox 5 Weekend Live. It's 1 o'clock almost now. We continue to cover the situation in Iran. President Donald Trump releasing a video message about the strikes against Iran. We had you listen to him earlier, and we are joined now by Fleitz, who is a former chief of staff of Trump's National Security Council. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.
So when we think about this situation and the allies that Iran has, what are some allies we should watch out for who have those nuclear threats that could impact us right here at home?
Well, that's a great question. It looks like Iran's allies are complaining a bit, but they're not doing anything to help Iran. The Chinese and Russians aren't happy about this. They haven't done anything. And I guess Yemen is a big ally. Cuba is an ally. But I think Iran is really alone, and they put themselves in this position. The president gave them numerous off-ramps to negotiate a solution to the security threats they were posing. The Iranian regime blew it.
Last June, we saw Trump was basically sending a message to Iran that you are not going to have nuclear weapons, hopefully setting them back years of building one. Since then, we've been in negotiations. But what was it? Because you could tell that Trump had even said many times, like putting military in place to be a threat to Iran should these negotiations break down and Iran not be able to offer peace and say that they're stopping any nuclear production of weapons. Why was it that today was the day where Trump said, my patience is over and we're taking action?
Trump has really been very patient. He gave Iran 60 days last year to negotiate a deal. The Iranians wouldn't negotiate. That led to the 12-day war, which Trump ended before the Israelis wanted to end it. He wanted to stop the killing. He wanted to stop the fighting. But what did the Iranians do after that ceasefire? They started rebuilding their missile and nuclear facilities. So we started negotiations again. The Iranians again tried to waste time and delay in the negotiations. And given how fast Iran's missile program is growing, I think that was a significant factor here on why the attacks took place when they did.
How much of a threat has Iran been to the U.S., not talking about Israel, but just us here domestically?
Well, I think in terms of the threat to the U.S., we're looking at the terrorist threat. We're looking at a state that in time will have long-range missiles. But we have a state that's determined to make nuclear weapons and has not given up that program, was given every opportunity to do so. And if Iran wanted a civilian program, it could import nuclear fuel rods like most states do, but it didn't want to do that. It wanted to enrich uranium itself so it could make nuclear bomb fuel.
How are we seeing Iran retaliate?
Well, we're seeing Iran fire short-range missiles at targets in the Gulf region. And I think by doing that, they're bringing in states who ordinarily would be on the fence. And I think the Saudis may join us in attacking Iran. Iran is firing missiles at Israel. These are medium-range, intermediate-range missiles, but they don't have that many of them because so many were lost or used last June. And it's expensive and time-consuming to rebuild them. And many of the missile factories have been destroyed. So at this time, I think Iran's ability to fire missiles at Israel is limited, maybe just a day or two.
When we think about this situation, of course, we're all talking about Iran, we're talking about Israel, we're talking about us. These are the three components. And how much of this is about China? What role did China play in this situation happening today?
You know, that's a good question because Iran is trying to build its missiles, especially its longer-range missiles. The factories to do that were destroyed. The factories to make the rocket fuel were destroyed. China has been shipping the chemicals to Iran to make rocket fuel for the ballistic missiles. So basically, China's already meddling in this conflict. And we don't know what other weapons the Russians and the Chinese may have given to Iran. I think the U.S. had an idea what they were. Russian missile defenses didn't help the Iranians last June, and obviously it's not helping them very much today.
China's come out to that point and obviously in opposition of the attack, saying it needs to stop immediately and saying that the U.S. has been at the core of a lot of unrest globally, wanting to start wars. And saying that, you know, the concern of this, that where does this, I guess, impact globally? Should a regime change actually happen in Iran?
I think we're going to see a large number of states coming around to supporting this. In Europe, they're not condemning it. They're calling for de-escalation. But many European states are saying that it is in the hands of the Iranians to stop the attacks and agree to give up its nuclear program. We're not seeing condemnations of what the U.S. and Israel did by the Europeans. We knew Russia and China would be against it. They would like us to go through the Security Council so Russia and China could veto this action. I think China will come around to understand that the U.S. is not going to tolerate a state like this that has been at war with us for 47 years and has actually been trying to assassinate the President of the United States.
Absolutely. So when we talk about retaliation, what does that look like? How can Iran retaliate towards us? Should we even be fearful of that at this point?
I think we have to be concerned. There's the missile attacks, but also there's the possibilities of sleeper agents that could be in the U.S. Look, Joe Biden did not defend our southern border. We know at least 11 million illegal aliens crossed while Biden was president, many of whom are gotaways. We don't know who they were. We have to assume some were Iranian intelligence agents. I'm sure the FBI has been on high alert in the run-up to this attack and right now to look out for any possibility that there are Iranian agents that could conduct terrorist activities in our country.
What about for the allies of Iran? We just talked about China, Russia. Should there be any further escalation that we could potentially see from countries outside of Iran itself?
The only allies we should be concerned about are the Houthi rebels in Yemen and Iran's terrorist proxies, mostly the Hezbollah in Lebanon. It looks like Hezbollah does not want to get involved in this. I understand the Houthi rebels have begun shooting missiles at ships not far from Yemen, but frankly, that will bring a very fierce retaliation from the large American armada off the coast of Yemen.
Absolutely. So what does the future relationship look like when it comes to us and Iran and the Middle East? Are we just going to be a friend to Israel at this point because that's who we've partnered up with? Or can that relationship be saved when it comes to an Iran and Iraq and other countries?
I don't think the nations in the Middle East are shedding any tears for the fall of this terrorist regime. Iran has backed terrorist movements in most of these countries, is trying to acquire nuclear weapons that no nation in the region wants, and attack regional states. I think if we can get a government in Iran that is moderate and peace-loving, we will see a major expansion in Middle East peace and in the Abraham Accords. I think many states will be joining it.
The plan today was to take out a lot of the Iranian leaders, right, and have a regime change. We don't know if all of them or how many of them at this point, to my understanding, have been taken out. Should they go into hiding? Should they have had plans? As my understanding, that they were prepared. Should some of them be taken out to pass this over to others? Where are we in what leadership and the regime change might be actually taking place with the attacks that have happened today?
Well, we're hoping that these attacks, not just on Iran's WMD facilities, but on instruments of the regime that has been used to oppress the people and to kill innocent demonstrators, that the combination of these attacks will encourage a large and self-sustaining protest movement that will oust the regime. But this has to be done by the Iranian people. We're not going to send troops into Iran. We're not going to try to remove the Iranian government and dismiss the Iranian military like we did after the second Iraq war. We've done what we can, and next it will be up to the Iranian people.
Yeah, the Iranian people. So we think about that, right? How they're going to be impacted. We also saw images coming out of Iran that showed some of the destruction in the aftermath following the strikes there. The soldiers were walking around by the cars as well. So the cars were destructed. What does peace look like for the residents there? I know President Donald Trump mentioned to them that, hey, do not leave the house. There's going to be bombs outside. It's not safe. But I mean, it is tragic to think what could happen to the residents during this time, because apparently the airstrike will last days, not just hours.
You know, it's hard to predict how this is going to work out. I think it was encouraging that there were large demonstrations beginning at Iranian universities over the last week in anticipation of this action. That could mean that much larger demonstrations across the country will begin. And that could be the end of this regime. If the leadership has been knocked out, if communications have been knocked out, we just have to pray that that will be enough for the Iranian people to throw this regime out and put in a moderate regime that is pro-democracy and wants to have a positive relationship with the United States.
President Trump offered immunity to those that will join the opposition and try to overthrow this current regime. How effective do you feel that that will be?
I think that was a good offer. I like to see it followed up with large cash payments to members of the regime who decide to defect, or to members of the military who refuse orders to shoot on demonstrators.
Absolutely. So when we think about how this impacts us, our interest here at home, what is in our best interest? How are the next few months going to look for us after this situation?
Well, look, we know this was a risky move because many Americans do not want us to get involved in a regime change operation or more foreign adventures. But President Trump determined that an Iranian nuclear weapon is an unacceptable threat to the United States. And I believe most Americans agree with him on that. There's many Democrats who will be coming out against it. Not Senator John Fetterman, though. I really give him a lot of credit for stepping forward and saying this is the right thing to do. There was a day when politics ended at water's edge, and Americans supported their president when taking actions like this. I think we're going to have some substantial support from the Democratic Party, maybe not most members of the party, but I think they're going to see at the end of the day, this is the right thing to do.
To that point, politically, Trump has kind of basically been on the campaign trail as midterm elections are coming up, even leading up to November. How do you feel this might impact those?
Well, I'm sure there are advisors to the president who asked him not to do this before the election because it's unpredictable. It might not work out, and the election's going to be very tough. But the president made a decision that he had to do this now because it was the right thing to do and because Iran's missile and nuclear programs were becoming such a serious threat. I think the American people will respect that decision, a bold decision that he made, regardless of political implications.
So I'm thinking, what if Iran does not back down? What if the regime does not surrender? What plan B do we have in place if something like that happens?
Look, the president has made his best shot to put the Iranian people in a good position to rise up and overthrow this regime. He's weakened the regime as much as he can. We just have to pray this will be successful. The outcome is not guaranteed. I don't know what the steps will be if this doesn't work out, but of the list of bad options to try to deal with the situation, I think this was the best.
Some people are even asking, why does this even fall to the U.S.? Why should the U.S. even be involved in this in the first place?
Well, because an Iranian nuclear weapon is an unacceptable threat to U.S. national security. And after repeated attempts to use diplomacy to get the Iranians to give up the pursuit of nuclear weapons, they've refused. Now, numerous presidents have tried to address this. I think the efforts by Presidents Obama and Biden were frankly foolish. It was just kicking the can down the road. Trump has decided not to do that.
But aren't there other countries that could be involved with this?
Well, it would be great if our European allies were involved with this, but frankly, most of them are spineless, and this was simply too controversial for them to get involved in. We didn't go in alone. We went in with Israel.
When we talk about those airstrikes and, now we're all braced because we've been told it's going to last days, how does that impact our resources back here at home, or does that not have a connection?
I think this has all been figured out, the amount of military hardware and ammunition that is being used here. We will use some of it up. Obviously, there's going to have to be an effort to backfill our arsenal. But, as I said, the president made a determination that this was a good investment. This was a good risk to take for our security.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Sorry.
Say, how much concern is there going forward for maybe some cells that might be here in the States? Like, do Americans need to be concerned about their safety and their security from this?
I think Americans have to be vigilant, and if they see something suspicious, they should, call the police, call the FBI, because as I said, I think 11 million illegal migrants entered our country during the Biden administration. Hundreds of thousands, we don't know who they were, and some of them very well may be intelligence agents or terrorists who are Iranians.
So when we talk about the Iranians that are in Iran, of course, we were watching that situation play out for a couple of weeks where Iranians were mentioning how they felt like, quote, they were in the Hunger Games and things were not going well there. They said that they felt like they were disconnected from the outside world when it comes to not having internet, which was caused by what they had mentioned, the regime, and not being able to go on social media, talk about what was happening, not have internet. can those situations improve after this? Because I think what a lot of Iranians were speaking on when they were doing that, obviously broad comparison to the Hunger Games, is that they want a change in what they're able to speak on, because what we have here at home, like, we have our own set of issues and conflicts that we deal with here in America. But for them, even wanting to post something, let's say on social media, that right can be taken away. So it's about basic human rights. Do you see that improving for Iranians after our involvement? Can they have those rights where they won't be scared that, hey, Thursday morning, there's not going to be any internet, there's not going to be Facebook or social media that I could use to either inform myself or somebody else?
I think part of this operation will include an effort to smuggle in Starlink terminals, more of them, so Iranians can communicate with each other and tell the outside world what's going on. There's been a determined effort by the Iranian government to hunt down these terminals. If you keep the Wi-Fi setting on, apparently the Iranian government can locate them. So there's been warnings going out to Iranians using these to turn that off. But there's been searches of apartments to find these terminals, because the Iranian government knows that they can cut off these information links. They can keep the people from organizing. So I suspect there's a substantial effort to smuggle a lot of these terminals into the country right now.
This is obviously an incredibly historic day. We've seen a lot of emotions coming out from those that have been oppressed, from those that are from the country Iran and love their home country and have seen what has happened to their people, and they can't even go home to visit some of their families. We've seen the emotions of those that are against that as well. Just how bold of a move was this, and how difficult for President Trump to decide?
Well, I know many Iranian Americans, and they can't go home, and they know that some of their fellow Iranian Americans who do go home get arrested, and they're in jail for extended periods of time. It's an evil regime. That's what this regime does. I think it was an incredibly bold action. It was a risky action. And as I said, the president took this ahead of midterm elections, not knowing how this would work out. Most presidents are risk averse. All they think are political implications. But I think in this instance, President Trump is doing something because it's the right thing to do that has to be done now.
Absolutely. So when we think about you saying it has to be done now, do you think the way this was done, are you in agreement with it? Could something have been done differently with how things played out?
I think it was done well. And, President Trump received a lot of criticism for not intervening early in January when Iranians were dying. And I think the reason he didn't do that is because this operation had to be planned and coordinated. He had to say to his generals, I want to do this, but I want a plan that's going to work. I want to work with our allies. I want to work with Israel. And he wanted to give diplomacy a chance. So from my perspective, this has been done deliberately. It's been done with a lot of planning. And the Iranian leadership has been given every opportunity to prevent this from happening, but they weren't interested in negotiating seriously.
Even during those negotiations, plans were underway for a day like this, and we've seen the U.S. military be put in place, Trump having the Navy stationed right there. We know this is a huge air attack. This is not something that just happened like it was over in June, where it was a single strike. It's a lot different than what happened in Argentina. Just what was the extent, and is currently the extent, as it's still ongoing, of our military force in action, and the logistics going into this attack?
First of all, I think this attack was a surprise because we attacked during the day. And ordinarily, attacks like this by the U.S. or Israel would be done at night. And I think that by doing that, I believe the Israelis were able to take out meetings of large numbers of Iranian officials who assumed there wouldn't be an attack midday. Also, an attack midday allowed the Iranian people to see it and hopefully to inspire them to demonstrate against the regime. I believe there will be many phases of this attack. The initial attack was focused on missiles, missile launchers, air defense systems. I think once they're taken out, there'll be other elements of the regime, security forces, ammo facilities that will be taken out over time.
Well, President Donald Trump also mentioned that Iran is the world's, quote, #1 state sponsor of terror. So how much of that statement do you agree with? I mean, we have so many different countries that he has spoken about, whether that's Venezuela a couple of weeks or months earlier. Do you agree with that statement that Iran is the most dangerous when it comes to terrorism?
That's been well known in Democratic and Republican administrations. The Iranians were responsible for terrorist acts, killed American soldiers in Beirut, in Saudi Arabia. They sent IEDs into Iraq that killed many, many American soldiers. They've been sponsoring terrorist groups worldwide. They've been backing Hamas. They've been backing Hezbollah. They've attempted to assassinate the President of the United States. They sent in at least on 2 instances, individuals to capture an Iranian American in the New York City area and bring her back to Iran because she was criticizing the regime. This is a regime that's been engaged in terrorism worldwide for a long time. And Democrat or Republican, I think there's agreement that Iran is the top state sponsor of terrorism.
When we talk about security, what actions were taken today or for the long future to not have a nuclear weapon of Iran, and for they cannot, hopefully put an end to some of the terror that they have brought for decades under this current regime here. Now back home, as national security, we've seen around here, just even in D.C., there's going to be an increased police presence around metros, even for there. Secret Service saying they're going to have increased presence around some of our bases and such. What further actions need to be taken just to make sure that we stay safe here?
I think there's going to be increased vigilance for some time because there's a possibility of Iranian sleeper cells or agents in the country. I believe the FBI is on top of that. I think it'll be in public places, government buildings. I'm not sure where else, but I believe this was part of the planning for this operation.
When we talk about Prime Minister Netanyahu and how he has handled the situation, now he's told folks in Israel that they are going to have to practice resilience. How do you, in your opinion, think he has handled this current situation?
I think he's handled it well. He's worked closely with President Trump. I believe he probably wanted to act sooner, but Trump wanted to go through at least the motions of diplomacy to give the Iranians an opportunity to make a deal. But also Trump wanted this thought through. He wanted his generals to think it through. He wanted to look at all the contingencies, how it might go wrong. But I think Netanyahu has been a very strong ally and friend of the United States. And I think he's really proved it in this operation.
There's also been a lot of criticism on how he has handled this. Many people saying there's created genocide, not being able to help the people in Gaza throughout all of this. Could that have been handled differently, and are those claims fair?
You want to talk about the war in Gaza?
Well, just leaving with Netanyahu of how he's kind of handled a lot of this leading up to it.
Well, we know on October 7th, Hamas launched a terrorist attack to kill Israelis and took, I think, 250 of them hostage and held them underground until whoever was left alive was just released. And it's really appalling that whenever this issue is discussed, Israel seems to always be portrayed as the bad guy. That's just the propaganda in the mainstream media, propaganda promoted by Hamas and by their allies. This was the act of genocide against the Israeli people, the worst attack against the Israeli people since the Holocaust. And Netanyahu and his government have taken steps to defend his country and to make sure that this never happens again.
Absolutely. So many innocent lives just gone on both sides, correct, on this conflict. So I think what we're getting at here is just the leadership aspect of Netanyahu. But you said you think he's handled things correctly. Well, we want to thank you so much.